Today, the economy is like a house of cards, just waiting to fall at any moment. And the reason is because we run on debt. The government runs on debt, and so do all the businesses that we know, or most of them do at least. The government currently has trillions of dollars of debt in the United States. In Canada, it's probably nearing the 1 or 2 trillion mark as well. And businesses, don't get me started. They all practically run on debt until they can become somewhat profitable. Now you're probably wondering, what's wrong with running on debt? We've been doing that our whole lives, haven't we, with all the credit card bills and mortgages? Now let me give you a quick example. Let's say you have a mortgage and you're paying it month to month because you have a stable income. But what happens if you lose that stable income, like you get laid off? Well, what you're either going to have to do is you can either choose to default on your loan and say to the bank that you can't pay them back and they take your property, or you can choose to cut spending. So maybe you do some extreme budgeting, cut your meals, cut your entertainment and all your traveling in order to make those mortgage payments and use up whatever savings you have in order to keep your house until you find a new job. This is the same situation that we may find our businesses or governments in. Let's say the taxpayers aren't paying as much taxes because they lost their jobs, or consumers aren't going out and buying much stuff from businesses because they don't have jobs to spend on discretionary items. Then these businesses are finding that their revenues are declining and they're unable to make their debt payments that they owe other people like banks or financial institutions. And at that point, these businesses need to cut back on their spending, and that might result in a layoff of employees or just closing down the business as a total because they can't make a profit. And in short, this is how most recessions happen, or market pullbacks happen, because there is a decline in economic activity. With the current situation and this disease running rampant in our societies, many economies are coming to a complete halt, and people are forced to stay home. And this is because the government is mandating it in order to contain this beer sickness that we're seeing. But this comes at a massive opportunity cost. And what is the opportunity cost? It's the opportunity that people could have been going to work and producing some sort of useful economic output. However, on the flip side, if production continued on and people continue to produce goods and services, the opportunity cost here is that people could get sick and the disease could spread a lot quicker. And as people start to die off from this disease, that life that died could have led to a lot more economic output. So not to sound like a heartless person, this is all looking at it from the economy standpoint and how the government is weighing it and trying to keep their country alive. Because in the end, if you don't work, you don't eat. So stopping the production of goods and services right now may cost us in the short term billions of dollars each day. However, the loss of life that could happen if we continue this on could be in the trillions of dollars. Maybe we could lose half the world's population. And I think this is the fear that a lot of governments have right now. So for this reason, they have chosen to halt economic activity and tell people to stay home. Now the real question that we have here today is, how wide of an impact will this beer sickness have on the economy? Well, let's take a look at it. Welcome back to The Fire Grind. On this channel, we talk about everything and anything that has to do with personal finance, especially how you and I can become financially independent and retire early. Before we talk about how wide an effect this beer sickness can have on our economy, as usual, let's dive into my wealthsimple portfolio. Before we jump into the big question of how widespread of an effect does this beer sickness have on our economy, let's check out my wealthsimple portfolio and see how it's done today. So if we jump into it, we can see that I'm down 5.77%, and this equates to a $600 loss on paper, and the total portfolio value is $11,100. Although the portfolio is down, we've been consistently being paid dividends over the past month, and we can see in the month of March, I've received up to 10 dividends so far, and the latest one on March 19th was from Manulife, and they paid me $5.60. So the companies that I invest in, a lot of them have great balance sheets, and they're going to be able to weather this storm. And I believe this storm may last for a year or two at most, and this is what we see with a lot of the recent recessions. It usually takes about a year or two for the economy to come out. And if you're wondering when is a great time to invest, check out my previous video that I'm linking up here, and tell me what you think, whether right now is a great time to invest or not. If you haven't already done so and you're looking to get into investing, click the link down below for Wealthsimple. You can get $5 towards your investing career after you deposit $100. Also, while you're down there, just click the subscribe button so that you can continue following my journey along, as I like to post my portfolio updates every time in my video to update you on how the portfolio is going and share the insights that I have and what I'm thinking about doing next. So how big of an impact are we going to see on the economy? Let's look at the United States, since they are currently viewed as the world's largest economic power out there. And if they fail, because a lot of countries depend on trade with them, we're going to see a huge downturn in the world's economy. So the different sectors we're looking at today in the United States consist of travel and tourism, retail, food, accommodations, energy, transportation, manufacturing, materials and natural resources, utilities, communication, real estate, finance, tech, healthcare, government, consumer staples. So these sectors that I listed out, they're sort of in a strategic order how I think the beer sickness is going to affect them, with tourism and travel first, and healthcare, government, and consumer staples being last. So to start off with the tourism and travel, we can see that there are 5.3 million people who are working in this industry in the States, according to this article here. My prediction is 40 to 90% of these people will be laid off. And how many people is that? That's 2.1 to 4.8 million people losing their jobs. And the reason I say this is, if we look at cities like Vegas or even New York, they're pretty touristy, and we can see these have completely shut down. Especially Vegas, just the entire strip, all the hotels, all the casinos are shutting down because people don't need to travel at this point, and they really can't travel. A lot of airline travel is restricted right now. In other articles, we see that Air Canada has laid off 60% of their flight attendants. Norwegian Airlines, on the other hand, has laid off 90% of their workforce. So the second wave contains retail, travel accommodations, energy, and food services. In the retail sector, it employs 16.8 million people, and I believe that 60% of this workforce can be laid off, and that equates to 10 million people. The reason behind this is, if we look at the breakdown here, the major sectors of people that are going to be laid off within this industry are the sales associates, making up 18%, supervisors 16%, cashiers 13%, and a potential extra 10% out of the corporate office and other smaller jobs in this sector. Online orders will continue to happen, however at a slower rate, because in this time of so many people being laid off, people won't be spending as much money and cutting back on their spending, especially on the retail sector, as a lot of these things that they buy are sort of consumer discretionary items where they don't need them day to day. The food services industry employs 11.9 million people, and I believe that 50% of these workers can be laid off or temporarily laid off, and that's about 6 million people. And if we look at the breakdown of this sector, it kind of makes sense. We have waiters and waitresses making up 14.8% of the workforce, and no restaurants are opening right now, so they're probably all going to be let go temporarily. In addition, bartenders, no bars are open, that's 3% of the workforce. We have cashiers, no one's paying in cash right now or going to stores, so that's 6%. And we have the corporate, which will probably cut around 10% of the workforce because they're just trying to skim down the amount of expenses they have, since their businesses are clearly not making much money at the storefront. Other parts of the businesses, delivery is still running right now, and for this reason, I believe that half the workforce will be laid off. We have your cooks at 6%, and that's half the workforce. The food preppers at 2%, fast food at 1%, supervisors at 1.5%, and the food services at around 4%. That's the timer for my cheesecake. Let me pop that out and let's get back to this. Smells good. So with delivery still happening, I believe the food industry will continue to go on, but definitely at a slower pace. And as people are trying to cut costs, they're not going to go out to eat as much. Rather, they're going to cook in, because you can save a lot of money if you cook in, up to 80%. The next sector we're looking at is energy, and this is a lot smaller of a sector. It only employs about 145,000 people. However, this made big news recently because there was a price war around oil happening between Saudi Arabia and Russia, and US is really getting caught in all the middle of this. The main source of oil that US is getting right now is through fracking, and fracking costs about $50 per barrel. However, if we look at oil prices today, they're down to $24 to $30 per barrel. So all these oil companies will probably be shutting down in the near term because they can't make a profit at all. Last in this wave of layoffs, we're looking at in the accommodation space. And this is specifically for travel accommodations, like hotels or motels. Maybe even Airbnb is included in this. And we can see that it employs 1.6 million people. And my guess is that we're looking at a 70% layoff rate here. And the reason for this is we can see that Italy has already closed down all their hotels, and I'm sure in the States they're going to do this sooner or later because no one's traveling. So in the hotel sector, we can see that they employ maids, housekeepers, janitors, food services within the hotels, desk clerks, and the managers as well. And these make up the majority of the positions, and there's no way that these guys can work from home or do anything. They need to be at the hotels. However, those hotels aren't operating, so therefore, there's going to be a lot of temporary layoffs and up to 70% of the sector. The third wave that we're going to see is natural resources and materials, transportation, and manufacturing. So in the natural resources and material sector, it employs about 683,000. And I think there's going to be roughly a 20% layoff in this sector just because people still need to buy things to live. Things like food, like toilet paper, a lot of this stuff can still be delivered to the house and people don't necessarily have to go to stores. So therefore, we won't see that big of a decline in this sector. However, they're probably still going to see a 20% hit based on consumer spending dropping by a bit. In the transportation and warehousing sector, it employs about 6.9 million people, and I predict around a 20 to 30% layoff rate, and that equates to about 2 to 2.4 million people. And the reason why this sector won't be hit as hard is people aren't going to the stores anymore to buy things. However, they're still doing their online shopping in order to get their daily life necessities. So because people need goods to live on, they're not going to see as big of a decline as other sectors. In addition, we might actually see warehousing pick up a bit, like at Amazon, because people are resorting to ordering online. And this will mean there's a lot more business for postal services. So in a way, the sector might balance out where certain trucking companies will definitely decline in business. However, postal services will increase because people are ordering online and not wanting to leave their houses. The last sector in this third wave is we have manufacturing. And in this sector, it can be anywhere from a 30 to 70% decline in jobs. And the sector employs 12.7 million people. And that will equate to 3.8 to 8.9 million people being laid off. And the reason why this range is so wide is it really depends on the infection rate that's happening in the US. If the infection rate continues to grow parabolically, we can see a lot more manufacturers close down just because a lot of people come into that building and there's a high risk when you group a lot of people into one building for people to be infected. And if there's one infected worker that has been in the plant will likely close down because there's a high risk that whatever they've touched, other people have touched it and the infection will spread quickly. So they want to minimize that risk of infection and sanitize their facility before workers come back to work. Lastly, the sectors that are most resilient to this are in the fourth wave. This consists of utilities, communications, real estate, finance, and tech. And in these sectors, I predict anywhere from a 10 to 30% decline. Real estate being 30% because people aren't going to be buying houses after they lost their jobs quite a bit, but this effect will happen a lot further down the road. The other sectors are a little bit more self-explanatory. They're affected later on down the chain because these businesses are a bit of a staple to our economy. Now, before I say there are 4 waves, there are actually 5, and here's a 5th wave. The healthcare, government, and consumer staples. And these are really the backbone right now of the economy because you need government workers and government will never shut down, otherwise the country will just go up in flames. Healthcare is required because right now we're fighting disease. In fact, healthcare might actually increase because the demand for healthcare is so high right now. In consumer staples, people will continue to need to buy these necessities in life, like toilet paper or food, or just things that you need like toothpaste. There may be a slight decline in this sector just because all the more non-essential healthcares or consumer staples will be cut, or certain sectors of government will be cut, like teachers may be cut because students aren't in class right now. However, the decline is definitely a lot more minimal. So if we look at this, we would say maybe to average out, we might see a 30 to 40% increase in unemployment at its maximum. And that is depending on how this beer sickness plays out. If it gets to a seriousness that society is completely locked down, it could get up to 40%. But in the meantime, we'll have to continue watching the news and see what's happening, and definitely weigh your investment decisions based off of this. But that is sort of the theory behind as how I can see a recession playing out in the next 3 to 6 months. But in the end of all this, I believe the virus will definitely die down, and we've seen this happen in China already. And the curve is flattening drastically right now. And I believe they'll be out of this thickness in about a month or so. So if anything, this might say to the economy of the US, we should be out of this in the next 3 to 6 months for sure. However, there are definitely lasting effects that this could have, as there is a lost opportunity cost, as people have been out of jobs right now, and they have lost that potential earnings that they could have over the 3 to 6 months. And we can never gain that back, because time cannot be gained back. We've lost this time, and really, time is money. If you've gotten this far in the video, thanks for watching this through, and I have a link in the description for some of the websites that I use in order to gather this data. Smash the thumbs up button if you really enjoyed this content and found it informative. Click the subscribe as I continue to talk about my journey to financial independence, as well as how you and I can improve our personal finance. And leave a comment down below if you have any questions or just want to discuss what your thoughts are and what your predictions are on this recession that may be looming over us. How far do you think the economy will drop? Maybe you have sectors that you disagree with the layoffs that I have. But at the end of the day, this is all speculation, and we can never predict the future on this. I hope you all stay safe and keep your jobs, work hard in this time, and keep up the grind and have a great day.